Squishies, back again with another vlog. This is Steven Universe Season 5, Episodes 19 to 23. The Heart of the Crystal Gems, Stevenbomb. So this would be, Now We're Only Falling Apart, What's Your Problem, The Question, Maid of Honor, and Reunited. Although I've seen it, I'm not doing Legs from Here to Homeworld because it's very clearly the start of something new, and Reunited is just a better stopping point. So I'm going to wait until there's more stuff. So, let's start from the beginning. Now We're Only Falling Apart. Despite it being about Sapphire running off after Garnet defuses in reaction to the huge revelation about Rose Quartz that we just had in the previous episode, this is really a Pearl episode. It's Pearl telling the story. It's her telling her equivalent to the answer. It's Pearl's origin story as much as it is Rose Quartz's, and that's part of the point of this episode is that all three of the original crystal gems, which it does seem to be, those were the first people to be crystal gems. Rose Quartz, Pearl, and Garnet. All three of them, their beginnings were kind of intertwined. It was not that Rose Quartz started a rebellion and they were the first recruits. They together founded it. And that actually does something I really like, because history is not about great men. There's this 19th century romantic idea of the great man theory of history, that these incredibly influential, important individuals changed the world through their own individual actions, and that's what determines the flow of history, is these great individuals. And that's just not true. History is complex, it's contingent. Sometimes an individual in the right place at the right time can make a choice that really does alter the flow of history, but most of the time it's groups of people. Now, of course, every group of people is made up of individuals, but it still is groups of people, large groups of people, that really shape history. So, but our stories are all based around individuals. We have heroes in our stories. And so that's what we're primed to look for. And what our stories are full of is, especially more speculative kind of fiction, it presents us these alternate histories, future histories, things like that, in terms of characters, which is to say in terms of great men, or great women in this case, or great gems. And I like that this kind of mitigates that. First, we had the complexifying of Pearl, or not of Pearl, of Rose. The she's also Pink Diamond, We've been having a lot of complexifying if we're going back to Season 3, but this is kind of culmination of it. Second, and what this episode is really doing, is it wasn't just her. It was a group of people coming to similar realizations at around the same time and helping each other figure it out that led to the rebellion, that led to the formation of the Crystal Gems. It's always been a group. There was never a moment at which one person rebelled and inspired everyone else. It's always been a group all inspiring each other. And I really like that. I also really like that we see kind of the beginning of the love story of Rose and Pearl. I'm totally okay with Rose and Pearl having this thousands of years long relationship, and Rose then going with Greg, and them having that relationship. Like, I'm okay with that as a story. I think it was clear that it was Pearl has mentioned men coming in and out from time to time. It was an open relationship. It was open in a little bit of a one-sided way, since it was at least implied that Pearl doesn't, seek out other relationships. But then again, we had all those phone numbers, some of them predating the 10-digit phone numbers, which means they date back to before Steven's birth. So no, they were both dating, at least from time to time, outside of that relationship. It was not a monogamous relationship, but it was a loving one. And I really loved seeing its beginning. I really loved seeing Pearl talking about imagining this fantasy, and the way Rose responds to it with the stars in her eyes. It was beautiful, and the way that Garnet inspired them. It was a triple thing. Pearl brought them down to Earth in the first place, to do the tour of the Earth. She inspired Rose to rebel in the first place. Rose inspired Pearl to go outside of her limitations. And Garnet inspired both of them to fight for gems as well as for the Earth. I love it. I love the three of them all inspiring each other. Next episode, What's Your Problem? Possibly the best Amethyst episode ever. I love On the Run. It's one of those points at which, I feel like, unless I'm probably forgetting something that happens earlier, but that's definitely one of the episodes where it's like, this show is good. Like, that's one of the points at which I sat up and took notice of how good this show was. As opposed to being like, yeah, this is a good show. This is the moment at which it's like, this is something special. And On the Run is one of those moments. One of those moments where just, the baseline quality of the show goes up a solid notch. And this was as good or better of an Amethyst episode, and that is something. Her monologue to Steven at the end is amazing. Her speech about how she doesn't want to burden him with her problems because all the gems always do. And she wants to be there for him instead of him always being there for everyone else. She wants to know how he feels about his mother and this huge revelation about her. And Steven's comment at the end is absolutely right. Sneakily, over the course of her character development, Amethyst has become the most mature of the crystal gems. Because that is a hugely mature thing to do. It is, in fact, what Rose said in the answer that is still one of my favorite lines in the entire show. Who cares how I feel? How you feel is bound to be much more interesting. That's exactly what Amethyst is saying. She's saying, I am going to put aside how I feel for the moment so that I can be here for you because you have a lot of shit going on right now. And that's incredible. That's such an amazing thing to be able to do. To be able to say, right now, like Steven does it all the time, but Steven is still immature in the sense of he doesn't know when to say, I need to take care of me for a bit. He doesn't know when he needs self-care. He's always trying to take care of everyone else. And Amethyst is recognizing that he actually does need that. And that she doesn't so much. Not right now, this second. So she'll help. She'll step in and take care of him. And that's beautiful. That's amazing. Like, I don't have a ton to say about this episode, but it might actually be my favorite of the batch. Just because it just sneaks up and is like, oh, by the way, Amethyst's character has been developing amazingly this whole time, and you didn't really notice. I say that, but this whole batch of episodes was excellent. Yeah, I don't know if it's possible to pick a single favorite. I will admit to being a little less enthused about the question. I think it's got an important point to it. I think it's a great parallel to the answer. Okay, the answer is love. But what was the question? And, obviously the whole episode is building up to popping the question. But even before that, it's connecting to the answer. It's asking the question of, who am I? What am I here for? What am I doing with my life? Where am I going? And love is an important part of answering that question. It doesn't have to be romantic love. It is for Ruby, but it doesn't have to be. Steven answers that question as well with a very different kind of love. The familial love he feels for all of the crystal gems and all of the people of Beach City, and essentially everyone he knows. But for Ruby, it's romantic love. Who do you love? Who can you love? How do you love? These are important parts of the who am I question. And it's important to ask those questions. Sometimes it takes us a long time to figure out who we are. Said the 37-year-old woman who only figured out she was trans a few months ago. 7 months now. Almost 8. So yeah. Moving forward, Maid of Honor. Maid of Honor. So I said a lot about Bismuth. It was a very divisive episode when it aired, and understandably so. It has left a wound in the show. There are certain events that we feel have to be addressed later. That when something happens, certain things happen in a show, it's like, okay, this needs a follow-up. An example would be the whole situation with Lars and the off-colors. That eventually needs to be resolved. But that's also been set up in a way that it's very clearly going to be resolved, probably next season. In fact, I'll get into that when I talk about Legs from Here to Homeworld at a later date. But, then there's other kinds of things that feel like they need to be resolved, but also feel like they might never be. And that's what I'm talking about as, like, a wound in the show. And in Steven Universe, that's Bismuth. It's this huge hanging thing that the show did that felt incomplete, that felt like not necessarily a fumble, but like something was definitely left kind of floating out there, ready to fall. And this is finally resolving that. Finally bringing Bismuth back and dealing with the fact that she wasn't wrong. Because that's the huge problem. Bismuth was not wrong. She, based on the information she had available to her, she was right. The crystal gems were never going to win unless they started killing. And what she didn't know was that there was a way to get yellow and blue on their side. Excuse me. Frankly, Rose didn't know that either. Excuse me. What Rose knew, or thought she knew, was that if they started shattering diamonds, that a weapon that could actually shatter a diamond would kill her. Pink diamond would be the obvious diamond to shatter. She didn't want to die. She also didn't want to explain herself. So she quite selfishly sealed Bismuth away. So the show is admitting that sealing Bismuth away was wrong, and that they should have let her out sooner. I'm glad they finally did. They outright say, Sapphire says, that they should have done it sooner. And I'm really glad the show acknowledges that. And I'm really glad that Bismuth appears to be here to stay. Even if she ends up with, like, satellite gems, crystal gem status, the way Peridot has, that's still awesome. And if she became a main, that would be amazing. And that just leaves us with Reunited, which is good, because my throat's starting to get real scratchy. Reunited is... Excuse me, sorry. Excuse me. Reunited. A whole lot of things came to a close in this episode. I want to start with the very beginning of the episode. First of all, I love the orchestra tuning up, although it does kind of imply a musical episode that we don't get. But I kind of think that's intentional. That we're going to give you something that implies one kind of episode and then give you another. Just like we get the big happy wedding and then the diamonds show up. And it turns out to be the closure of a lot of other things besides. Second of all, I actually really love the song they sing in this one. It's not one of my favorites in terms of something that I'm going to listen to outside of watching the episode, necessarily. But there's some lines in the song that I love. In particular, the bit about Mom lived in hiding under the name of Rose with the friends she picked and the form she chose, something like that. And you'll notice I've been consistently referring to her as Rose because that is her name. She chose to live as Rose, and it calls back to Greg's response in the question that he's not bothered by the discovery that rose quartz was pink diamond thousands of years ago, because Rose is the person he knew. Rose is the person he fell in love with. And hey, he never told her he used to be Gregory DeMeo. And that's exactly it. Greg Universe is Greg Universe. Because that's the name he lives by, the name he chose to be. And that's an important thing to say, particularly in a show that deals with as many queer themes as Steven Universe. I tweeted a couple days after, when I was rewatching the episodes, because I watched them several times, because I liked them a lot. And I tweeted a couple of days after they first dropped that I had a lot of trans girls' feels about those lines, and I still do. Except that I'm not living in hiding. I'm coming out of hiding. I'm no longer living in hiding. Including from myself. And I think, in a lot of ways, that's true of Rose. We become who we pretend to be. Sometimes. And I think she was Rose. She was Rose. The actual wedding is beautiful. I love the use of the acoustic version of Stronger Than You as a processional. I love the vows. Excuse me. I love that Ruby is in the dress and Sapphire is in the tux, because take that, people who ask about lesbian relationships, which one of you is the man and which one of you is the woman. They're mixing it up. Ruby is usually the more masculine-coded one, but here she is in a dress. And Sapphire is usually the more feminine-coded one, but here she is getting married in a tux. And when they fuse and that tux-dress combo film, amazing. Of course, big thing in this episode is the diamond attack. The cluster, like so many things are coming together in this episode. The cluster is able to act, like all those shards within the cluster are now able to function collectively in a somewhat limited way, but they're able to control themselves enough to side with Steven against the diamonds. And that's amazing. And to not destroy the Earth when they partially form, and to then unform again and return to their bubble. That's an amazing thing that Steven accomplished, and the cluster really has accomplished. And then, for me, the big moment of the episode, and the latest edition, I mentioned my favorite lines in the series, and the latest edition of my favorite lines in the series, there has still never been anything quite as good as the line from Stronger Than You, you're just mad because you're single. But I felt worse is close. Because grief sucks, but I've experienced grief and I've experienced trauma. And grief doesn't even begin to compare in intensity. Grief is terrible. But yeah, Lapis has learned to live with the intense feelings of self-loathing and self-doubt and pain of first her time within Malachite and then afterwards, and the fear that she lives with, and she has learned to stand with all of that. So Blue Diamond can't touch her. And that's amazing. And then, of course, the resolution, which now the resolution of, I'm blanking on what it's called, but Gem Harvest. The resolution of Gem Harvest makes a lot more sense now. This is what that was about. It's not, oh, your family, you have to forgive each other. It's using the family connection to pull someone back from destructive behavior, make them stop, make them pause, and say, hey, do better. And that's where Steven is headed with Yellow and Blue. And, you know, the way I want things to go, because I do think there still are always people who you can't convince. There are always going to be people who you need to stand up to. It's not enough to just love at them. So the way I want it to go is that White Diamond is so much worse and totally unwilling to listen, and they have to fight her. That Yellow and Blue are persuadable, but it takes a lot of effort to get them to change their ways, and that in the end, there does still have to be a revolution. I'm hopeful that it'll go away. I'm hopeful that the creators of the show aren't that naive. But I guess we will see. I guess that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, essays, let's plays, and more. And I'll see you all next time. Bye.